So today we enter the last stage of the negotiation. That means basically that at some point they should move the negotiators from the initial confrontation, the belligerent stage, the claiming value stage, to the collaborative stage, the creating value stage. There is no formula as to how this should happen. It's basically chemistry, getting to know the other, dispelling all the fears, the initial suspicion, and try working constructively on something that will change the game from a zero-sum game to a win-win situation. It also depends on the personality of the negotiators. You need to win the confidence of your partner. The opponent becomes a partner. It involves change or shift of mindset, of orientation. So in some negotiations it happens sooner, in others later, in others it never happens at all. This is why many negotiations end up with a failure. Hopefully here, I noticed in the previous session some early signs of people trying to be more practical, more pragmatic. So we'll see if today they'll manage to undergo this transition and approach a chance of an agreement. Now, if they don't sign an agreement, this is not a failure of this exercise, because the emphasis in our exercise, in our simulation, is on the actual process of negotiation, not necessarily on the final result. And since many negotiations end up with not signing an agreement, that would be an approximation to reality. So again, we'll see if this works out. If not, hopefully they'll have the taste of how negotiation process actually happens. Let's see. This is the last segment of our negotiation simulation. And so far, it's been interesting. Very close to real situations with all the anger and frustration, miscommunication, misunderstanding, confrontational mindsets, attempts to get the biggest part of the ZOPA. Most of your efforts was directed at claiming values instead of creating value. Now, hopefully, this being the last segment, today there might be a shift. Don't force it. Go with the flow, feel the atmosphere, see how the chemistry goes. But by now, one of the major psychological barriers to move from confrontation to collaboration has been removed or lowered, and this is actually getting to know the other. And by getting to know the other, the individuals, the persons in the other delegation, we kind of break down or mitigate or lessen the categorical thinking. So some of the fears have been put aside, hopefully. Depends again on the chemistry, and every negotiation has different atmosphere and different pace to it. In some negotiation rounds, this rapprochement, this warm-up, comes later, and in others, never comes at all. So let's see how we develop, how we progress today. If you don't sign an agreement, it's not the end of the world, because the emphasis in this exercise is on the process, to let you experience the process, the pulling and howling of negotiation. If you manage to sign an agreement, well, that would be a bonus. Okay? Good luck, guys.
Hi, I'm Noelle. I'm a representative of the DIC, which is the Department of Industry and Commerce. Reflecting on the past sessions, I think the last one was very contentious. There was a lot of aggression and focusing on value claiming, and that's something that I hope to transition to from the previous session into today's session. So Professor previously spoke to us about hopefully moving over that hump and then moving into kind of recognition of the same goal, which would be having the harbor placed in our port So hopefully we can see a little bit more of give and take, or more cooperation between all the groups, and a recognition that from the 5 groups of the city that we need the DWI just as much as they need us. I just want to bring us back to where we were on Monday at the end of the session and kind of remind us where we were. I think the day overall was contentious. And then we ended off by saying the DWI had received an offer from Alexandria, I believe. We want to keep you here, we want to keep your business. And I think an important thing to do in moving forward is recognizing that our interests are equal to your own interests, which is having a port. And then we moved forward, and I had asked you at the very end, let's throw out a number. Let's say, we only wanted to give you $1 billion to move your project forward. But in light of the new information with Alexandria, and in light of the other concerns from the other groups, we wanted to put forth $2 billion as an initial offer. So we just wanted to hear from you kind of what you're willing to work with us about, given the fact that we might propose, or we might put forward this $2 billion to fund your project.
What are you looking to hear from us? Do we accept? Do we not accept? Is that what you're asking?
It's not necessarily a matter of accepting or not. We're just going to work with this assumption. So we're not like finalizing anything. Just like if you work with this broad assumption, then what are some of the points in which you would need some help with on our end, in order to keep your business here and for you to establish your port here.
My name's Katie, and it's the last day of the negotiations. I feel as if it's gone pretty well so far. On our first day, we got it clear that we're doing mid-level industry, which was really easy to get out of the way. But since then, we've really been struggling on a lot of the different issues. And the last class, we were blindsided by this coalition. I'm part of the DWI, so I felt blindsided by this coalition that just formed out of nowhere and said, this is what we want X, Y, and Z, and we're basically not saying no to it. So today I feel that we're going to have to really work to negotiate something out with the coalition and really come to a conclusion that everyone's happy with. I'm hoping that they will be more willing to work with us and come to a conclusion.
We want to offer, I believe we talked about this earlier, offer something where we start 2-to-1 and go 1-to-1. I remember we talked about this.
That's perfectly acceptable. That's just not.
After 10
what are
years.
going to be like after 10 years?
Mm-hmm. So are we going to make 10-year contracts
Yeah.
and with the workers, and then their contract expires, and then we're going to have to
go 1-to-1 based on qualification, like
Okay.
both sides, not just like preference
Mhm.
the label but of the labor. But the thought was also that like our people would be involved in the training, whereas Adam said not involved in the training,
At
like
all,
that the
literally
company
nothing.
would have full control. So we were just like, sorry.
We do
Yeah.
believe that we can do the training because there's going to be a lot of new business and new industry that this country just hasn't seen before. So we do want to have it's the whole point of going 2-to-1. We just don't want you guys to have total control over
well, no, it's
our
not
project.
that. It's not that we'd be fully in charge of the training, but like we're also looking to make our laborers more employable.
If we were to say medium industry, let's say partial avoidance, the 1-to-2 moving to 1-to-1 preference, a $2 billion loan, and let's say the 10-year 1% compensation plan. Do you think that is something that you could accept in large part, or at least with like minor tweaks? Could that be the basis of like a fairly good? Now, sure.
Yeah, you want to say that again?
Yeah, how much was the loan, did you say?
$2 billion. Let's assume $2 billion.
Mid-level,
Yeah, so mid-level.
partial avoidance,
Partial avoidance.
1-to-1.
Well, but are you guys later?
Yeah.
Two to
Two
one,
to
and
one
then
for 10
Oh,
years and then
okay.
1 to 1.
The little average between those.
Yeah.
Then 2 billion,
2 billion loan
and then
and a 10%, or the 1% 10-year plan. Would that be in the realm of the possible?
I'm Stephen Moranci, and I'm part of a council of the other ports. So I think up until now, we've been pretty contentious with each other. Obviously, the first day was kind of figuring out what was going on, groups forming. On the second day, I really pushed with the leaders of the Environmental League and Labor for a coalition. Felt that this would prevent us from being kind of singled out and kicked out, the three of our groups, because I felt my group especially had one of the weakest positions, and I didn't want to see that happen. And I'm pretty pleased with how that went, because of the current plan being discussed. Obviously, it's not accepted, but the plan being discussed is our plan. So any changes are going to be from our base plan, not somebody else's. So I think that went pretty well, and puts us in a good position to kind of back down and to get into some value creation and be a little less confrontational. So hopefully get a resolution. We might get off to a rocky start. Tempers were certainly hot last time, but certainly I'm going to do my best to not inflame anything and just to kind of try and shift it to value creation and to a resolution. I'm prepared to make some sacrifices, but I think I've got a few ideas. I'm hoping that everyone can win here.
Can I put forth just a quick idea? As we're working at the details of the rules of employment, since you're giving us, in some ways, you're ebbing with us here, correct? Perhaps we can work with you even more so on the rules of employment, so that we can also gain something environmental. Are you see what I'm saying here?
What are you trying to just?
No,
like
so I don't know if the labor unions would be willing to decrease down to a 1-to-1 faster than they've already put forth in order to help out the DWI, so that the DWI then would be willing to work with us more on the environmental protection. I don't know if that's in your favor.
So you're trying to ballpark 1-to-1, significant or partial restoration, significant repair, and then a 450.
Well, that's tough because in this collaboration coalition that we did, the labor union is also in charge of doing the reparations for the environment.
Yeah.
So
Right, so-
bringing it down more is but there's still a lot of pressure on the labor union. It feels like we're not
No,
gaining
this
as
could be
much.
This could work greatly for you if you see it as, okay. So let's just say this is 2-to-1, right? And you're saying that we're going to go down to a 1-to-1 in, let's say, a 5-year time frame. Okay. Well, how about we go 2-to-1, and we change that time frame to 2 years to 1-to-1. So that gives you greater control over that, right? But then you help us out here, which would in turn help the labor unions back out. If you give us more repair on this, that would employ the labor force. And maybe
How
I'm
is
seeing this
giving
More money or more significant repair.
you-
I see.
helps out the labor union in.
So she said that she's being employed by the restoration projects. So if you allow for greater restoration, that would employ the labor union. So they're losing out on this end, but they're gaining back on this end.
So the labor union will in turn be employed by the environment.
Yeah. Their workers will
That's
be
where our
used
compensation was
for
coming
the
from.
environmental repair.
The deep meaning of mid-level, okay, is losing a lot of money for you guys. Because we're relinquishing the heavy stuff for, light industries. You know what it means for you? Less working hands. Because, dealing with delicate materials, less workers than metals. So this is what's at stake here. So don't rush to give up. the
I
big
was
stuff.
told by other ports that they do mid-level as well. They don't, because I tried to offer that they get the heavy industry, but I was told that they don't take heavy industry
No,
either.
they're not, that's not a deep water port.
And they also said something about with unlimited, it means sort of like any type of business can come and do their business in our ports, be that fracking or other things that can be potentially really harming to the environment, which is why we're like, okay, mid-level it is.
And by the way, the training, it's nice, but it's very costly. Who's going to pay for that? And these are different types of training because the other ports, well, they have different type of ships coming in. So,
But we also
what's
have
important in negotiation? Not if people want to sign an agreement, not to leave things vague or indifferent. Because then they sign an agreement, and then suddenly it dawns on them that they meant different things. So they return to the battlefield. So make sure that all those terms are understood the same way and to their deeper level. So it seems like we have reached a stalemate. We are at the stage of claims, counterclaims, and trust is not being built. There is not much confidence. This is the time for creativity. One of the most critical things in negotiation, any negotiation, is thinking outside of the box, being creative, use a lot of ingenuity, a lot of inventiveness. This is basically trying to change the payoffs from finite to infinite, thinking that they can create value, that they can think together and come up with mutually satisfied options for each side. This can be done if each side reads the preferences and priority scale of the other, and then realizes what are the red lines for the others, and becoming more flexible if the other side reciprocates the same way. If they manage to find some kind of a common ground whereby they can be more lenient with regard to the things that are most important to the other, and the other realizes that they have to act likewise, then a common ground and an opportunity to move from claiming value to creating value, that is, from confrontation to collaboration, is possible. Let's see if they can make it.
Okay, I want to start with the latest idea that we threw out in our room, and the idea is to move to no limitations on the mixing level, but in exchange, since that greatly concerns the environment, we will move to a significant repair. That's an idea that
And
we
we'd
are
be with
throwing
somebody
out.
in the BWI. We would also.
If we're doing, if we're doing the representative thing, should we like, who's?
Want to do two from each?
One.
That's, yeah.
One?
Just do one, and then you can always concur with, like, everybody concur.
And then, okay, so just to add on, he'll be the representative.
Okay.
And in addition to that, we would change it from 2-to-1 employment rules to 1-to-1 after 5 years. So before I said 10 years, but since the industrial mix will hopefully mean more jobs, then we can just make it 1-to-1 between DWI and the labor union after 5 years. What's up?
Before we move forward, that's just not going to be an unacceptable. That's just an unacceptable offer on behalf of the DIC. So I don't mean to kill things from the very beginning, but we just cannot do that.
This is a multi-party negotiation, which means that we have a multiplicity of topics and agendas and priorities and preferences, and they differ from one actor to the other. What I'm saying here is that this is a constant juggling act. If you think that you're okay on one topic, don't lose sight of the other. Because maybe, just maybe, the blanket is too short to cover everything. So I noticed several of you are very enthusiastic about one topic, semi-enthusiastic about the second, and then losing sight of the other three. So what's important here, to keep all balls in the air at the same time and control them, is to really understand what is meant by every option that you raise. Because if you go for mid-level industry, for example, this immediately has impact on labor relations and on the ecology and on the loan. And the loan, for example, does not stand alone. There are interest rates. And the training is also very costly. So somebody has to pay for this. So there are different arrangements around the obvious agreements. So if you don't look down to the details, then you live to regret it after an agreement has been signed. Somebody's bound to be frustrated because the small letters were not read in detail. So you have to pay attention constantly, be agile on all levels, all the time.